Hi, I'm Andy Lamy. I'm a musician. I play with New Jersey Symphony Orchestra on clarinet, but I'm also an amateur bird caller and bird watcher. I do breeding bird survey for the National Park Service project, the Northeast Temperate Forest Network inventory and monitoring to keep track of the bird populations. This is part of our data set so that we know how birds are doing. In this video, I'll cover some of the cases where you don't want to make any sound and times when it's encouraged to make sound, like if you're in your music studio, imitating bird songs from a Peterson recording, like Birding by Ear, for example, or Stokes, and times when it's really counterindicated to make any sound at all. You don't want to harass humans or birds. This is true of photographers as well. It's usually not the very professional photographers. There are photographers who are notorious for disturbing and harassing birds, and this is often to the chagrin of other birders, sometimes to the detriment of the bird's health. If they're near a nest or stressing out a bird that's in low body weight, starvation conditions, and forcing it to move from place to place in its wintering grounds. For example, a snowy owl in the New Jersey meadowlands that may be really counting on its next rodent meal and needing to conserve calories in order to keep warm in the winter. However, there are times, even in scientific scenarios like a bird research tour or at times on Christmas bird counts, when the potential for a rare bird has been established. Something's been seen in the distance or in the brush or in a canebrake, and the desire to get a visual confirmation is fulfilled by calling the bird out, or the dog in this case. Sometimes people will even use pishing techniques to lure birds. Read that carefully, and that might involve some modest squeaks or some sort of alarm calls, which can get the attention of birds. Sometimes a squeak rather than an alarm call will even attract a skulker that's very shy and doesn't normally come out of the bushes. Whereas an alarm call might, in some cases, with the more shy birds, cause them to just hunker down further and not reveal their identity. A modest bird call that's well placed and not too disturbing could make the difference in a first record of a bird or not. I've had first records of green-winged petilia in the eastern Gambia, and blue rock thrush and zebra waxbill, which was recorded for the first time in decades in northern Senegal, Connecticut warbler in the spring, a first time ever Wilson's warbler in the winter on a great swamp circle in Chatham. These are first records, and it was really important in those cases to see them. So even the serious researchers can, in the field, find some cases where some modest bird calling or squeaking or chirping could lead to an important confirmation of their data. So these are some of the many considerations that we'll talk about in this video. I'm here with my lovely assistant, Mango, the sun conure, and we're just going to talk a little bit about bird calling. I make the birdsong whistles, everything from the mid-range soprano Oriole grosbeak whistle. This one is brass with African blackwood, and it does a lot of mid-range birds like cardinal, oriole warbler from Africa. It could do rose-breasted grosbeak, it could do scarlet tanager, it could do summer tanager. But the beauty of birdsong whistle imitation is that you can listen to a bird in the wild or on a field guide, an audio recording at home, and start to imitate it. And if there are difficult sound-alike birds, the process of using your ear to determine how successful your imitation is, or using even a sonogram, say Raven Light from Cornell Lab, that will show you a graphic with time on the x-axis and frequency on the y-axis. You can compare visually the bird song that you've just created to the one that you're trying to imitate. There is a range of birdsong whistles, all the way from that rather medium one to some very, very high ones that really imitate quite nicely with a sweet voice the high-frequency coniferous species like golden-crowned kinglet or brown creeper, Blackburnian warbler, some of the things that are up above 9,000 hertz. Blackburnian goes to 11, just like Spinal Tap. And we've got some more mellow whistles, even owl-dove whistles, things that will have a wider diameter and give a deeper sound. And these whistles can really do a variety of things. Eastern screech, western screech. Birds will really respond to these, but it's important to know when not to call birds. And that's one of the points of the video today, is just to give a brief introduction to what is out there and what's possible, and how I think that most bird calling should happen at home in your practice learning studio, where you're trying to really imitate the birds Another great place to call birds is on stage, if it's called for in a musical composition. And with a little learning, a composer and a performer in the flute section or in the percussion section, the choir, musicians can learn to really imitate specific bird songs. And there have been some really great presentations of dawn chorus and specific birds for musical scenarios. But if you're out in the wild, you may want to refrain from calling birds at certain times. If there are researchers around or other birders, there's a rare bird alert, and people are gathered at a twitch, so to speak, whether you've traveled from afar to see a particular songbird, like if you went to Brooklyn Botanical Gardens a couple years ago to see the painted bunting, it wouldn't really be considerate or good birding ethics to show up and start making a lot of sound. Theoretically, the other people who are there, or even the ones who might want to come tomorrow, might be disadvantaged if you made bird sound at that point and perhaps stressed out a bird that was a vagrant. So it's important to really think. If a bird is on its nesting territory, it might not be a good time if it's trying to advertise its territory. A big disturbance of, say, predator calls could potentially lead to a mishap. So if you're actually calling owls or calling raptors, creating owl sounds or raptor sounds near a nest, in a scenario where there are chicks to be defended, one can imagine that bird calling might not be the most perfect ethics. Also, protocols of breeding bird survey would indicate silence and just silent observation. So there are a lot of birders who, when they're doing breeding bird survey or scientific research or observation in the field, they want to be absolutely silent and just observe what the behavior of birds naturally is without that intervention to which they would have to respond. So those are some times to really consider not bird calling. So that said, even the most serious researcher will sometimes find it useful to call birds. And I've seen this. Cornell and British Ornithological Union and African Ornithological Union ornithologists, authors. I've seen cases where it was desired to have something come into view for confirmation. In West Africa once, calling forth a greater swamp warbler from a reed bed where it was heard but not seen. That was a good visual confirmation. Similarly with some paradise widas and green-winged petilia and other finches, that was a case where calling the bird brought it forth. So thanks a lot. That's just a quick introduction on how anyone, even serious researchers, can occasionally find a moment when it's more disturbing to not call a bird, even though most of the time those same birders would prefer to just listen in silence and not influence the behavior and location of birds. Thank you, Mango, for all of your phenomenal help. We'll follow up with more videos that are specific to the different bird whistles and how to learn more about bird calling and how to learn more about birds in general. Thanks.